The crystalline communication array hummed with otherworldly frequencies as Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped into the sterile chamber aboard the Kepler station. The message had been clear enough. The hegemony demanded Earth surrender one human prisoner as tribute for their crimes against galactic order. What those crimes were remained deliberately vague, but the implied threat was crystal clear: comply, or face annihilation. They're expecting a broken soul, Director Chen had briefed her before departure. Someone to parade as proof of human submission. Instead, they're getting you. Elena adjusted her diplomatic sash, the silver threads catching the alien lighting. At 42, she had negotiated peace between warring nations, brokered trade deals worth trillions, and once talked a terrorist down from detonating a nuclear device using nothing but empathy and logic. But this was different. This was humanity's first contact with a hostile galactic civilization, and she was walking into their prison ship voluntarily. The transport beam seized her molecules and reality dissolved into sparkles of light. She materialized in a vast chamber that defied physics. Gravity seemed optional, with beings floating at impossible angles while others walked on surfaces that curved into infinity. The architecture screamed of a civilization that had mastered space and time itself. Yet Elena noticed something the hegemony had missed: fear in the alien guard's compound eyes. "The human tribute arrives," announced, a towering figure whose voice seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, Supreme Arbiter HFY, if her briefings were accurate. Its form shifted between gas and solid, a display of power meant to intimidate lesser species. Elena straightened her shoulders. "Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representing the United Earth Federation, I understand you have some concerns about my species." A ripple of what might have been laughter echoed through the chamber. "Concerns? Your kind violates every principle of civilized behavior. You wage war upon yourselves, destroy your environment, and show aggression toward any who approach your system. You will serve as an example." "Before I serve as anything," Elena said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard, "perhaps you could explain the specific charges? Due process is rather important to my people." The Arbiter's form flickered with what Elena recognized as irritation. No one questioned the hegemony. That was the point of the tribute system: absolute submission without discussion. "You dare make demands, prisoner?" "I prefer diplomatic guest," Elena replied smoothly. "Though I notice you haven't actually specified what laws we've supposedly broken. In fact, your message was remarkably vague on details." Elena had done her homework during the 3-day journey. The hegemony controlled 17 star systems through a careful balance of technological superiority and psychological warfare. Species that showed defiance were made examples of. Species that submitted completely were absorbed as client races. But humanity had done something unprecedented. They had refused to be categorized. "Your species exhibits dangerous independence," HFY intoned. "You refuse to acknowledge hegemony authority. You develop weapons. You expand without permission." "Ah." Elena nodded as if suddenly understanding. "So the crime is existing without your consent. That's not actually illegal under any galactic law I'm familiar with. Unless..." She paused, watching the Arbiter's reaction carefully. "Unless there aren't actually any galactic laws. Unless the hegemony simply takes what it wants through intimidation." The chamber fell silent. Elena could sense the other alien species watching, some floating in energy cages, others chained to crystalline pillars, all prisoners, all tributes from species that had dared to resist. "You forget your place, human," HFY growled, its form solidifying into something with far too many teeth. "No, I remember exactly who I am," Elena said, raising her voice so it carried to every corner of the vast space. "I'm a human being, and we don't kneel to bullies." She turned to address the other prisoners directly. "How long have you been here? What were your supposed crimes? Did any of you actually break a law, or did you simply refuse to hand over your freedom?" A being that resembled a crystalline spider spoke first, its voice musical, but sad. "My people developed faster than light communication. The hegemony demanded, We share it freely. When we requested compensation, they declared us criminals. Mine discovered a cure for the plague that killed millions across 17 worlds, added a creature of living metal. We offered it freely, but asked to remain independent. They called us traitors to galactic unity. One by one, the prisoners shared their stories. Each had been taken not for committing crimes, but for refusing to surrender their autonomy, their innovations, their right to exist as free beings. Elena felt the familiar fire that had driven her through every negotiation, every impossible, diplomatic situation. These weren't criminals. They were the galaxy's best and brightest, imprisoned for the crime of thinking freely. Enough! Zexhi's roar shook the chamber. You are prisoners. Your defiance only proves your guilt. No, Elena said quietly, but her voice carried absolute conviction. We're not prisoners. We're survivors, and we're about to become something else entirely. She pulled out a small device from her diplomatic pouch, a simple transmitter that had been cleared as a translation aid by Hegemony Security. But Elena had spent 3 days modifying it with components from her diplomatic equipment. You see, the thing about humans, she continued, activating the device, is that we're really good at networking. And I've been broadcasting everything, our locations, your ship's weaknesses, the truth about your galactic authority, to every free species in range. The chamber erupted in alarms as Elena's transmission reached its targets. She had spent the journey analyzing the Hegemony ship's communication arrays, learning their frequencies, and preparing for this moment. But more importantly, Elena said as the first explosions echoed through the ship's hull, I brought friends. The prisoner transport shuddered as human warships, arriving through coordinated hyperspace jumps, began their assault. But they weren't alone. Elena's transmissions had reached the Christek Collective, the Metal Synthesis Alliance, and dozens of other species who had lost members to hegemony, justice. You triggered a war, Zexhi snarled as its form began destabilizing. No, Elena replied, using her transmitter to override the prison restraints throughout the ship. Energy cages flickered and died. Chains dissolved. Across the chamber, beings who had been prisoners moments before stood free for the first time in years. I ended one. As the liberated prisoners overwhelmed their guards and the battle raged outside, Elena activated her emergency beacon. Director. Chen's voice crackled through the chaos. Elena, status report. Mission accomplished, Director, she replied, watching as Supreme Arbiter Zexhi and its remaining forces retreated deeper into their crumbling vessel. They wanted a prisoner to break our spirit. Instead, they got a negotiator who broke their chains. The hegemony had ruled through fear and isolation, keeping their victims separate and afraid. But humans understood something the hegemony had forgotten, that freedom, like hope, spreads faster than any plague when given the chance. As rescue ships began docking with the disabled prison transport, Elena smiled. Earth had sent them what they asked for, just not what they expected. And that, she thought, was the most human response of all.